thousands of people have mysteriously vanished in America's wilderness. Join us as we dive into the deep end of the unexplainable and try to piece together what happened. You are listening to Locations Unknown.
What's up, everybody, and we are back at it with another episode of Locations Unknown. I'm your co-host, Joe Irado, and with me, as always, is a man who is vegan, does CrossFit, and keeps it to himself, Mike Vandebogard.
Thanks, Joe. It is great to be back. Had some good couple of months here while we were off. I was actually out in Yosemite for a few days hiking, and it was great to kind of recharge, but we did get evacuated due to the forest fires.
Yeah, until you couldn't see anything from orange skies and smoke.
Yeah, but it was still a fun little trip. Glad everyone's tuned in again. So got a lot of house cleaning items to get to since we've been gone a few months. So first off, I'd like to just quickly thank all of our Patreon supporters. So over the summer, we've gotten a few Patreon supporters. So I'd like to thank, and I apologize if I've gotten your name wrong. So Neil Brophy.
We're really good at that.
Yeah,
names wrong,
really good at that. So big thanks to Neil Brophy, Mikhail Yusuf, Raul Gutierrez, Watson, Jamie Blackwell, Kate Thackeray, and Laura Bemis. So
Lauren Beams. I
apologize, Lauren. But no, really thank you so much for supporting the show. We've also got some exciting interviews coming up this fall, so I'll go through a couple of them here. So a while back, we did a case on Laura Bradbury, and individual reached out to me. Their father was the lead investigator on the case. So we are in the process of setting up an interview right now with his father, and
This will be an exclusive, too. This is the first time that he'll be speaking publicly about the case.
He's never really talked to anyone about this other than his son, and we're really excited to talk with him on the case. And he, obviously he's apprehensive to do it just because, he still probably knows a lot of the people that work out there in the sheriff's department, but we are doing an interview with him. The episode should be live, I would say, maybe in the November to December timeframe. So just stay tuned. We also this was, I believe, our 5th episode. So 2 years ago, we did an episode on a gentleman who went missing in Yosemite called Michael Allen Fissery. A family member of his reached out to me over the summer, and she was actually on the ground during the search and rescue operation, and she really wants to set the record straight on Michael and kind of what happened during that search and rescue operations. Really excited to talk with her. Again, that episode will probably be live later in the fall or probably in the winter time frame. And finally, this one I'm really excited about, and I think I've mentioned it in the past. We are working with a Native American expert we're going to do an episode on, kind of creatures from Native American folklore, and she is an expert on Native American history and culture. She's actually Native American, and she's helping us out with the research, and actually will be doing an interview with us. So
I'm really excited about that one for sure. That'll be great.
Yeah, that's going to be a really unique episode, and a lot of cool stuff with Native American history and culture. So I'm excited to do that episode. Again, I keep saying that one will probably be in the December to January time frame. We're still kind of working out the logistics of it.
Yeah, what's nice is because of you, our listeners, we've been getting a lot more views, and because of that, a lot more people are reaching out to us that know things about cases. So if you remember early on, we used to say all the time, if you know anything about the case, reach out to us. Well, that's starting to happen now. So we're getting these really exciting exclusive interviews set up with cases that we've done in the past, and even in some instances, newer cases and actual family members with the case. So thank you to our listeners for sharing it with your friends, because the word's getting out and our content is going to continue to get better for you.
Yeah. And We also have some really super exciting big news that we can't share with you yet. But
we gave a little teaser on Facebook, but we are on a gag order about it, but it's really exciting.
So I would really love to share more information about it, but at this time we can't. We expect what we're talking about to happen in the December-January timeframe, maybe. We're not quite sure yet, but it's really exciting. It's really cool that our show will be a part of this. So stay tuned. Hopefully we
Don't go any farther, Mike.
Yeah.
Get us in trouble.
Hopefully we can share more details soon. I promise we're almost done with the announcements. I know sometimes people on YouTube and other platforms they poke fun at us because we talk so long in the beginning. But this is our first episode back.
Yeah, this is back from break. Too bad. You can fast forward. There's a fast forward button. Figure it out.
But we still love all of you that listen. Also, even though we are back finally, we probably will be taking a pause for, I'm guessing, a month. I am getting married in the beginning of October, so I will be
unacceptable.
I will be unavailable for a few weeks, but we should be back in mid to late October with another episode, so stay tuned with that. Almost done with the updates. I'd like to thank strangeoutdoors.com. They helped us out with this episode, and if you like the cases that we discuss in Locations Unknown, definitely head over to strangeoutdoors.com. They have a lot of articles on stuff just like we talk about, so they've been a great partner. We've partnered up with them on other episodes, so check them out. And finally, if you saw over the summer, our website was hacked and deleted, and we still have no clue what happened, but thank you to one of our listeners who brought it to our attention. We finally have a new website up. It's kind of a work in progress. There will be more features added to it, including I'm going to add a feature to allow people to suggest cases. So I get a lot of emails and messages from people about different cases. This will be a great way for everyone to go to our website. If you know of a missing persons case you think would be a good fit, fill out our little form and send it on over to us.
Yeah, we're going to build it better than it was before, and that's just another testament to how popular we're getting, Mike. We get hate mail, and people are attacking our website.
I know.
We're getting pretty big. I'm excited about all this.
I don't know if it was a hack or incompetence with the host. I don't know if I'll ever know, but we have.
It was a hack because we're so popular.
Yeah. So that is the end of my updates.
All right, everybody, let's gear up and get out to explore Locations Unknown. The Pacific Crest Trail, a trail that spans over 2,600 miles on the west coast of the United States. Taking almost 5 months to fully complete, finishing the Pacific Crest Trail is a feat very few have achieved. Along the way, hikers experience the burning heat of an expansive desert, the stunning snow-capped peaks of the Sierra Nevada mountain range, and the tranquil beauty of the Northwest temperate rainforests. However, the PCT has a more mysterious side. In recent years, a string of unsolved disappearances have puzzled those who live near and hike in the trail. Join us this week as we investigate several disappearances on the PCT and try to piece together what happened. The Pacific Crest Trail, or PCT, officially designated the Pacific Crest National Scenic Trail, is over 2,600 miles long, 2,653 miles to be exact, and is aligned with the highest portion of the Cascade and Sierra Nevada mountain ranges. The trail is generally 100 to 150 miles east of the Pacific Ocean and starts just south of Campo, California, near the U.S.-Mexico border, and terminates on the Canadian-U.S. border on the edge of Manning Park in British Columbia. Famous sections of the trail include the John Muir Trail, Sonora Pass, Sky Lakes Wilderness, Donner Pass, and Badger Flat to the Little Willow Lake. The PCT passes through 7 national parks, including Mount Rainier National Park, Yosemite National Park, and Crater Lake National Park.
So, Joe, have you ever stepped foot on the PCT?
I have not.
I can't remember if we walked on it a little bit when we were in Mount Rainier. I feel like we might have. And this last summer, I was actually on the John Muir Trail in Yosemite.
So you were on it in that part, or was that not part of it?
I don't think the part we were on was part of the Pacific Crest Trail.
Okay.
So,
well, the PCT was conceived by Clinton Churchill Clark in 1932. It was designated a National Scenic Trail in 1968 and was officially completed in 1993. The PCT is also part of the 6,875-mile Great Western Loop. Now, it's estimated that around 700 to 800 people start the PCT every year, but only 60% usually finish.
People might think, like, only 800 people hike the trail. Those are people that are only specifically planning to through hike it. So there's probably tens of thousands of people that hike sections of it.
Sure.
But
and through hiking for the listeners is any time that someone intends to start at the trailhead and end at the terminus in one trip.
yeah.
Now, there's people that will do sectional hikes of it where over the course of their lifetime, they'll hike segments of it and then complete it in segments.
Yeah.
And that does count. It doesn't count as a through hike, but it counts as finishing the PCT. But yeah, the big of the Triple Crown is doing it in one shot. So you have to be the type of person that's got 5 months off of your life to just do that. 57 hikers have walked the trail more than once. So we're getting down to very, very low numbers of people who have done this and then done it multiple times. On average, hikers who plan to through hike the PCT can expect to spend anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000. And this is according to REI. So that's in meals, gear,
Shipping.
things that have to be replaced. Yeah, anything that has to be replaced along the route as you're going.
You'll find a lot of people will have things shipped to certain spots along the route so that you can pick it up when you hit that spot.
Yeah, so a lot of work is sometimes placed on family members to make sure that they get packages and things like that at the right time that they're making it to and from places.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, though, I mean, it's not like a ton of people have done this, but there's only been 15 deaths on the PCT since 1983. I would have guessed there would be more based on like the treacherousness of the desert sections and things like that.
Yeah, there's the first 700 miles, and I'll get into this a little later, are you're in desert, and then sections through the Sierra Nevadas are pretty treacherous depending on the time of year you go. So it was shocking that only 15 people have died since 1983.
Yeah. Another cool fact, the PCT passes the 3 deepest lakes in the nation. Lake Tahoe, which we were just at for Mike's bachelor party, which was amazing.
It was.
Crater Lake, which is the deepest lake in the United States, and Lake Chelan. And in total, hikers will pass more than 1,000 lakes the whole way. The PCT climbs nearly 60 major mountain passes and descends into 19 major canyons. 10% of the PCT is on private land, and a free long-distance permit is required to hike the PCT. So you do have to show the permit if you're being a through hiker on the PCT. Mm-hmm. So here's a fun fact. Fewer people have through hiked the PCT than have climbed Mount Everest.
Which shocked me.
It's shocking until you think about it a little bit because the time commitment's the same, isn't it? It's like 6 months to do Everest.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the reason is. I think probably
maybe it's like less work to do Everest.
I think Mount Everest just has that kind of adventurous feel to it. To say you've climbed Mount Everest is probably...
Yeah, if I had to choose between two, as far as like, okay, I know I'm going to make it, I would probably say I'd rather do Everest.
I mean,
if I had to only pick one.
I want to do both. Mount Everest
I do want to do both.
Vastly more expensive.
Oh yeah, isn't that? It's like $60,000 to $70,000.
Yeah, and I think it may take you 5.
And the success rate's probably really low too.
Yeah, and it may take you 5 months to actually do the climbing piece, but I think to train to be physically ready for Mount Everest probably takes years. So.
Yeah, no thanks for that.
No.
So I'll talk a little bit about the different climates. We touched on it in the intro a little bit. The climate ranges from desert hot heat to high alpine hiking. So that can even require crampons and ice axes. So people typically time when they're going to start based on the duration of the hike to hit different times of the year to make sure that they're not in treacherous winter or the worst type of heat. So from April to September, temps range from the lows of 32 to highs of 86.
You'll notice when we get into the 3 cases we're going to discuss, just think about the times they were trying to hike the PCT. And I really think, we'll get into it more, but I really think those, when they went hiking, factors into why they're missing.
Okay. Mike did the research on this one, so I'm coming in blind to this. But just remember for the listeners now, the best times to hike is snow-free summer months, which is in April or May. So the elevation ranges in the PCT goes up and down. It tops out at 13,153 feet at Forester Pass in the Sierra Nevadas. So it's not too high, just under the 14,000 mark. It's well above tree line in some spots, but it's not like you're getting super gnarly altitudes.
You will be spending a lot of time in the Sierra Nevada stretch, though, up at pretty high elevation. I know altitude sickness is one of the concerns when doing a thru hike, so just keep that in mind.
Animals, marmots, squirrels, chipmunks, rats, mice. There are 8 different species of venomous snakes. So you have the western diamondback, sidewinder, speckled rattlesnake, red diamond rattlesnake, southern Pacific rattlesnake, Great Basin rattlesnake, and the Mojave rattlesnake. There are black bear and mountain lions and cows. Watch out for those cows.
Yeah, one of the things you don't think about when you're hiking out west is venomous snakes. When we were hiking Yosemite just this summer, we hiked up to Mount El Capitan, and on that short little mile hike, we saw at least 3 or 4 rattlesnakes on the trail. And
yeah, those can really, and you don't see them. They're really good at being camouflaged. Remember when we were at Zion after all the rain?
Yeah,
all the snakes were coming out on the path, and we almost stepped on a rattlesnake.
Yeah, and
I've never seen someone jump that high. It was, I think Ben was in our group, and I think he got like a 6-foot vertical and all instinctual,
superhuman jump. But yeah, snakes when you're out there hiking is a concern, especially if you're off trail. If you're on the trails, it's easier to spot them. But if you're stomping around in high brush, up to your knees or hips, you got to be really careful, because you get bit by one of these, you're gonna need to get to a hospital to get the antivenom.
Yeah, quickly.
Yeah.
So then we'll get to kind of more insects and other types of bugs. There's mosquitoes, which can be more annoying. Scorpions, they won't kill you, but they're extremely painful. I was actually stung by a scorpion in Florida, and it's way worse than it was way worse than a bee sting. But nothing really happened. It's just really, really, really painful. Mm-hmm. If you're allergic to them, obviously that's different. Yeah. You can get ticks, which sometimes carry Lyme disease or Rocky Mountain spotted fever. And then there's bees. So I would say on most normal hikes, that's not a huge deal. But if you're in deep backcountry and you're doing something for 5 months, something like a bad bee sting reaction, or if you get an infection from some sort of sting, can really impact the trip and throw off all your times, where you might have to be due 15 to 20 miles a day to stay on schedule. And if you get set back a few days, that could be really, really, really bad.
Well, yeah, and for a scorpion sting, there really isn't anything you can do about it other than you're either going to have to stay in place for, up to 72 hours to let the symptoms go down, or somehow get yourself to a hospital where you can get antivenom, but you can only get that in a hospital. So
sure.
And most people probably will get stung, and it hurts for a bit and then it'll go away. But some do get pretty sick, but you're not going to probably die from it.
Plants, there are some poison oaks and poodle dog brush, things that can, again, cause reactions, inflammation, things like that can hamper the route. The terrain, as we said, it's desert, high alpine mountains, rainforest, so it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Which means that exposure is a high risk, especially when you're in the desert sun or on the high alpines, exposed to thunderstorms, snow, low temperatures, and there is a lack of shelter because you're on the back country, so you're going to be in tents and things like that. So, and you'll be low on weight, so it's not like you're going to have your normal body fat to insulate you from some of these things. You're going to be losing a ton of weight and things like that. So it's very difficult, and it's why very few people do these.
Yeah.
So with that, Mike, I know you have some information on hiking the PCT, and then we're going to go into the first of these stories.
Yeah, so for people that are new to Locations Unknown, we usually do a relatively quick location profile, and then we kind of dig into the character profile and timeline. For this one, we're going to kind of go through 3 different disappearances a little more quicker than we normally do it, but I thought it would be kind of interesting before we did the different cases that I kind of just talk about the PCT if you were to hike it down the road. And I think a lot of people that do listen to our show are hikers, and they like going out in the wilderness, and I think this information could be kind of valuable to people that want to go hiking it. So difficulty on the PCT, it's kind of all over the map. If you're through hiking it, you're going to get the easy stuff and the really difficult stuff. So you're going to be obviously hiking through desert for a good chunk in the beginning. That brings its own difficulties with exposure and having enough water. Then in the Sierra Nevadas, you could be hiking through snow and on, cliffs and, through scrambles. So you may need, ice axes, crampons, things like that. And then the Oregon Washington section is, you're like on the home stretch. Oregon section's pretty flat. You're going to be going through some dense temperate rainforests, and you can really pick up the pace there. So like I said, the first 700 miles of the PCT is desert. It's going to be hot and dry. You want to make sure you carry plenty of water. And if you pass a water source, you do not leave it without filling back up and drinking as much water as you can. Having too little water out on the PCT in this stretch is deadly. It's not, don't think like, oh, I'm only going to, need this much water. I need to cut back on weight. No, you bring as much water as you can. We did this in the Canyonlands when we hiked. You want to wake up early and get a good chunk of hiking in before the peak sun of the day. So get up as soon as the sun rises early in the morning, hike until about 11:30, and then really just find a shady spot and take a few hours off. Eat lunch, relax, rest. When you're in deserts, you do not want to be hiking at noon. It's the worst part of the day to hike. So just, have a siesta for a few hours, and then maybe, around 2:00, start hiking again and hike until dusk. Sunburn can become a real issue in the desert. So, you watch all those old Westerns and you see cowboys with long sleeve shirts and pants on. They did that for a reason, because they don't want to get sunburned. So wear long sleeves, long pants, and kind of a big, cowboy hat. You want to make sure you have adequate clothing during this phase too. It does get cold at night, and you can expect rain, snow, and hail probably more than once, even though it is a desert. So once you get out of that first stretch, you're kind of getting into the Sierra Nevadas. Now, most people that have hiked the PCT say this is the coolest part of the trail, but it's also the most dangerous. So hikers are high up in the mountains. They're on ledges. They're crossing scrambles. They may need to traverse heavy snow, so you're going to have some snow gear with you. And sunburn is an actual issue up in this elevation too. So make sure you have a lot of sunscreen with you, lip balms, and polarized sunglasses.
Lip balm is understated. I didn't learn how important lip balm was until I started mountain climbing and getting sun exposure. It's incredible how that can change the dynamic of a trip.
Yeah. So in this section of the PCT, just slow it down, take it slow in spots, because it's going to be pretty sketchy in areas to cross. Cross creeks safely. Depending on when you're going, the creeks may be flowing pretty good with a lot of snow melt. So just take your time. One of the things people really talk about is also altitude sickness. So some people at altitudes of 10,000 to 14,000 feet really start feeling the symptoms of altitude sickness. So just before you go, read up on what those symptoms are, and just be prepared to take action if you or anyone in your group is, experiencing those symptoms. The final phase of the PCT is in Oregon and Washington, and this is generally the easiest part of the trail, just because it's more flat in Oregon, and there's a lot of water, and it is surprisingly remote though. So a lot of people say don't expect, hotel stays in Oregon. You're going to be kind of, backcountry camping a lot. So, and they expect lots of rain. Obviously, most people, if they've ever been to the Northwest, they know it rains a lot. So make sure to pick up some rain gear at one of your stops before you get into Oregon. So that is kind of a quick little summary of what you could expect on the PCT. So I'm going to jump in right into our first case. Our first case is a gentleman by the name of David O'Sullivan. He went missing on April 7th, 2017. He's originally from Ireland. He's a male, age 25. He's 5 foot 10 inches, 154 pounds. So he's your typical adult male. He seems like, based on his weight, he's pretty healthy, fit guy. He had brown hair, blue eyes. Clothing he was last seen in, he was wearing glasses. There wasn't a lot of information on what he was wearing, but he had a very thick Irish accent. So probably if you ran across him on the trail, you would not forget him. And Joe and I always talk about trail names. His trail name was Leprechaun.
Oh, so he was very Irish.
Yeah, very Irish. He's from Ireland.
If he gets that nickname, he definitely has a thick accent.
So he had just recently completed degrees in English and philosophy at University College Cork, and he was inspired to walk the PCT after reading the book Wild, and I believe they made a movie out of that book too. I haven't seen it.
Yep, with Reese Witherspoon.
From what I was able to read, he was not very experienced in the wilderness. People called him basically a novice hiker, but he did spend a lot of time preparing for the trip. So friends said that I'm not even going to be able to say this name, but he hiked the highest peak in Ireland, which is about 3,400 feet, carrying weights. He even transformed his parents' garage into a mini gym. So he didn't have a lot of hiking experience in America's backcountry, but he was trying to physically get ready for it by, hiking with weights on and, working out a lot.
That's more than most people do. So he probably did his research and knew kind of what type of shape he needed to be in. So that I would argue that's more than most people when they do certain trips like that.
Yeah. So he had no experience in this location. He also had no alpine hiking experience. Even though he was hiking that peak in Ireland, 3,400 feet is not going to prepare you for, hiking up at 12,000, 13,000 feet. So very inexperienced. But it sounds like he did all of his research, so I'm assuming he had the proper gear with him. There wasn't really a mention of the individual items he may have been hiking with, but I think it's safe to assume that he probably prepared and read up on it. So he started off on the PCT on March 20th of 2017. So if you remember earlier, we were talking about the best times to hike the PCT. You really want to start it in April, probably May, to avoid a lot of the real nasty winter weather. And he, unfortunately, is hiking a little earlier than I think I would. So weather definitely probably factored in here as we go on further. So he started hiking the PCT from Campo, California on March 22nd. He planned to hike the entire PCT from the border up to Canada. So April 5th, 2017 rolls around, and he has been hiking for 2.5 weeks when he found himself in, now I'm going to say this wrong, I think it's Idlewild.
Yep.
Sound right? So he found himself in Idlewild, California, a small mountain town at the foot of the San Jacinto Mountains. Idlewild is a popular holiday spot. He spent the night at the Idlewild Inn, which is a family-owned hotel. He arrived into, so this is a quote from somebody in the town. He arrived into this little town on the 5th called Idlewild. It's about halfway up the mountain, 2.5 weeks into his hike. He did a few chores, got in touch with all his friends on Facebook, and contacted us. Everything was going fine, and he was leaving on the morning of the 7th, and he's not been heard since. So he gets to this town on, April 5th, and he's contacting everyone. He's, getting kind of ready, and he set off, and that's the last time anybody heard from him. So
there's no indication that something was going wrong or
no,
there's any issue.
No indication.
Wow, only 2 weeks in. He just started.
Yeah.
Wow.
So in correspondence with his family indicates that he had plans to hike the morning of the 7th. So he gets in on the 5th. He spends a day kind of just hanging out in the town. I'm sure it's a pretty cool little mountain town. And he planned to spend the night of the 6th and get up the morning of the 7th and start hiking. So it says that he had been waiting for an adapter for his Kindle to arrive at the post office and was considering waiting until it opened to set off, but he was concerned that it may interfere with the schedule, and he never ended up picking up the adapter because reports state that the adapter got sent back to the retailer. So,
okay, so I think this is an important indication of the type of person we're dealing with here. He was so concerned about his itinerary that he didn't stop to pick up something that would be like a comfort item that I'd say other people might be willing to wait around for. So he's not the type of person that will go off trail, and this is all speculation for me. This isn't something I know. But
yeah,
if he's that careful about his time, he's not going to be wandering off trail or doing things he shouldn't be doing because he wants to get a good start in this. And it's the beginning of the trip.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not going to have a lot of that deviation when you're kind of fresh in mind, on the schedule, ready to go, in high good spirits. And I think that's going to play a role into what potentially could have happened.
Fast forward to June 30th, 2017. Now, this is kind of sad. Joe and I always talk about this, and I'll go into what I mean here in a second. So he had arranged to meet a friend in Santa Barbara in May, but he never turned up. And Carmel and Con called, so his friends were Carmel and Con, and they called the PCT Association asking, like, hey, our buddy was supposed to be here. He didn't show up. Can you help us? And he was told, now this is according to the articles we read, he was told by the association that we're not a babysitting service and there's nothing we can do. So as a result, David was not officially reported missing until June 30th, 12 weeks after he had last been seen. So this is shocking to me. We always talk that the first 24 to 48 hours of somebody going missing in the wilderness is the most important time.
Yeah, and that seems like a very odd response for the PCT Association. I'm only saying that because everything I've heard about them as far as resourcefulness and being helpful has only been positive. So I know you're reading the research you got, so I know this isn't coming from me and Mike saying this, but my personal opinion is I wonder if there's a little bit more to the story than they called them and said, hey, our friend hasn't turned up, and they said, too bad, and hung up the phone.
Yeah.
That raises a red flag in my head as to, did something else happen? Did Carmel and Con do something where they weren't asking appropriate? I don't know. I'm just saying, as far as like what elicited that response, because you I don't see that as a normal response to a question of, hey, it's been weeks and we haven't seen our friend. What do you think's going on? So,
and there wasn't a lot of information on the backstory with Carmel and Con, so I don't know what could have happened between them and the association. I just get back to the fact that he wasn't declared missing until 12 weeks after he was last seen. This is troubling just in the sense that your best chance of finding someone alive is within the first day or two, especially in this kind of environment.
Yeah, and in 4 months or 3 months is a wide range of somebody potentially, if it's towards the end of that time, how far did he get, or was it right away after he left that small mountain town?
Yeah.
And you just have this giant area where he could be.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's really hard for searchers when you have such, hundreds of miles of trail he could have potentially hiked. He could have gone missing along any of it. So it's tough. A search was launched in the Whitewater Preserve area just north of the San Jacinto Mountains, which would have been en route to David's next scheduled stop. So the reports go on to say, despite the use of helicopters, dogs, and ATVs, the search and rescue team came up with nothing, with no evidence of foul play. There's been little in the way of official investigation since. So interesting kind of tidbit about this too are several hikers have called in eyewitness statements thinking they may have seen David at one point on the trail. But again, none of these sightings have turned out to, be a positive confirmation of David. And most of the times it's just like a vague, oh, we heard a hiker with an accent. I mean, there's a lot of probably foreigners that hike the PCT, so that's not very helpful.
Sure. Yeah, it could be like a witness bias where were in the area at relative to a time and they kind of want to be involved, so they might have seen something type of deal.
Yeah, and there was even it's become known now that at the time there was a German man hiking the PCT that had a striking resemblance to David, so people might have been confusing him. So
okay, yeah, that could be bad. And what we learned too in our 2-part case was that a lot of times these thru hikers get to know each other through their log entries.
Yeah.
And I wonder if him going too early hindered that potential as well, of him not bumping into thru hikers as frequently as he might have if he left at the proper time, to where we would have been able to understand more about his journey.
Yeah, potentially. So fast forwarding again now to December of 2017, an aerial survey was conducted over the Idlewild area. The pilot, Gus Calderon, and mission specialist Richard McCrite overflew 88 square miles of both the mountain face and deep desert, taking over 1,000 photographs of the ground below. Volunteers then analyzed these images in detail, looking for signs of David's blue backpack. Gus and Richard also used software supplied by Aero Scientific. Now, we actually talked about this kind of software in our episode about the Canadian gentleman that went missing in Joshua Tree.
Yeah, the PIO talked about it as like he mentioned it was like a mosaic almost.
Yeah, so Aero Scientific's flight planning software and flight management system were used to plan the flight runs over Idlewild and manage the camera system throughout the flight. An aerial survey successfully acquired over 1,200 color images of the area at 4-inch resolution. So really high resolution. And they run this stuff through a computer, and it basically looks for anything that's not natural.
Yeah, and this is how they found Paul Miller, was using the software. It can take a while to process, unfortunately, but this is essentially how they pinpointed his location off trail.
And I mean, they can find like a Diet Coke can on the ground. I mean, it's an amazing tool.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
that's insane.
So, and they've also been flying drones in a grid pattern over the area. And, people have been analyzing, thousands of images for clues. And up until, recently, nothing still has been found of David. So it's a puzzling case. Here's just some interesting notes I had on this case, and then we'll move on to the theories and on to the next case. There was a lot of unusual weather in this region that year, with an unusual amount of snow for so early in the season. There are numerous trails up the mountain, with Devil's Slide being by far the most popular, but just one day before David was last seen, a hiker reported getting a mile into the trail before encountering snow and turning back. So you have a scenario here too where David is inexperienced, never alpine hiked, and a massive storm blew in the morning he was setting off. So that's a red flag.
Yeah, that's a big red flag. And and this is again where what I was talking about before with his itinerary,
mm-hmm.
This could have the reverse effect, where if he's so anxious about being on time, he might push on along the trail when maybe he should be taking some time off and not doing that.
Yeah. So it goes on to say, he had told other hikers he had no intention of hiking the snow, and he did not buy any snow equipment prior to his journey. So, I mean, at least he knew what to maybe expect, and he didn't prepare for, he did kind of the opposite of what I do. If I know there could be snow in the area, I'm going to have snow gear with me, even if I don't plan to hike it.
Yep.
So I wouldn't do that if I'm hiking an alpine trail and it could snow. I'm going to bring snow gear.
Yeah, the weather changes in an instant up there. It's so gnarly.
Yeah, and that, just goes back to maybe his inexperience in alpine environments. He did make a $70 purchase at a local outdoor store, but the item was not registered at the point of sale. David was also using a half-mile map, which is a special map for the Pacific Crest Trail, and the map advises hikers to hike up Black Mountain Road when the snow when the snow is too bad to hike the other trails. Final little note here, he had visited an ATM before he set off the mountain, but he only withdrew a little bit of money for his next stop, and there was a sizable amount of money that was left in his account and has not been touched since that transaction he made. So, it wasn't a situation of maybe he got robbed and was forced to empty his bank account, or that he went missing and then down the road accessed his bank account. The money's never been touched. So, Joe, what's your theory on this?
I think based on everything, I think he was a more prepared candidate for doing a hike like this, but I'm going to chalk it up to inexperience and exposure. I just think even with the bad weather, and even though he trained and things like that, if this is the first time he's doing a hike like this and he's training based off of just reading books and YouTube videos, I just know firsthand when I'll read up and research hikes, they're always different. Mm-hmm. Even if you're listening to someone who's gone on that hike, what you end up learning after doing hikes for long periods of time over the course of years like we have is that, and just like you said, we kind of over prepare. And I'm sure there's more experienced lightweight hikers that would make fun of the amount of stuff we bring. Yeah. But I feel like I compensate for my inability to go on these hikes all the time by living in Wisconsin by over preparing for the worst case scenario. And this sounds like he read all the right books, but was probably prepared for mid-level to perfect conditions based on the hike, saying, okay, I'm going this time, the weather's going to be like this, blah, 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 blah. As soon as that changes and he's not ready for it, that could spell doom right away. And my gut's telling me it was either a section there or had to do with the desert. Exposure in the desert would be my biggest guess, because desert hiking is just no joke, even if you have an experience in it.
He should have been past the desert portion at this point, but I generally agree with you, Joe. I think the number one theory in my eyes is exposure. I think he probably set off that morning and he got up, some distance on the trail, and then the weather started turning south. And even though he wasn't planning to hike in snow, he didn't have the gear to handle it and wasn't prepared for that possibility. And I think maybe he got turned around, or maybe he started getting hypothermia, which we know causes, once you get cold enough, you don't start thinking correctly. So maybe he wandered off trail, or if it's snowing a lot, it may be hard to see what the trail is.
Well, and you think about our listeners that are in snow states, or anyone that's experienced it. If you get a 6-inch, 8-inch snowfall, it's hard to walk through.
Yeah.
If you're not like in snowshoes or anything. So if you can imagine now you're in a mountain pass and you're getting a serious snowstorm, low visibility, high snowfall, you're getting exhausted, potentially off course because you might not be able to see any cairns leading the path, or there aren't any, things like that. Again, if you don't have experience in that situation to know, all right, if I lose all my visibility, I need to stop moving and shelter until I can see again, because going off trail is one of the worst things you can do.
Yeah, and I think in this situation, I would turn around. I wouldn't even try to shelter in place. I think I would try to...
Yeah, if you're that close to town.
Yeah, just turn around.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, you shelter in place if there's no better option, like retreating to a town.
If you're 100 miles down the trail and there's no town within another 100 miles, then you better figure out how to shelter in place and stay warm.
You dig out, pop your tent up, and you just wait it out.
So I'll just end with this Reddit user who lives in, I don't normally like to quote stuff from Reddit, but this person supposedly lives in this part of California, and this is a quote from them about this case. "This is really not good. I live in Southern California and hike sections of the PCT regularly. His last major contact was from Idlewild, so he was just about to hit the Mojave Desert. There's no overestimating how dangerous this section of the hike can be to somebody with no experience in the desert." So, Joe, you're right. He hadn't hit the desert yet.
Yeah, and so even if you have this guy, he lives there, he could be being a little bit sensational about it, but let's take him at his word. He hikes it regularly, and he's saying, hey, this is no joke. He's got experience there, and he's saying this is a very dangerous part. So now you have an inexperienced guy hitting that with suboptimal conditions.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, I think this gentleman succumbed to exposure, and like we've seen in so many of these cases, these areas of the country are so vast that it really becomes hard to really search for these people when they go missing. Anything could happen. Now, this doesn't mean that down the road somebody might not find his remains. But yeah, I think exposure was the prime culprit here.
Yeah, I think it just goes to show too that like it's kind of weird to think about we have wild regions of our country because we feel so connected. Like anywhere you go, you have cell phone signal, things like that. But there are still vast sections of the states where you can die from being outside, and think places like this, and we see it all the time. So it's kind of sobering, if you will, about that. There's still some very wild places that this stuff can happen to you if you're not overly prepared for it.
Our next case involves a gentleman by the name of Chris Fowler, or he was better known on the trail as Sherpa. He went missing on October 12th, 2016. He was a male and was 34 years old. I don't have a lot of other information on his physical appearance. You can go find pictures of him online, and all the pictures I saw, he looks like a pretty healthy, fit guy. So no medical conditions that are, visible in his pictures. So it starts October 12th, 2016. He was dropped off near the trailhead at White Pass, where he grabbed a coffee before heading towards the Canadian border to complete the last 366 miles of his hike. This was the last time he was seen alive. So he had been already hiked a good chunk of the PCT, and he was really, on the home stretch. So close.
Yeah. So
October 12th, 2016, now it's 5 p.m. This was the last time his cell phone was reported to have pinged a tower. So we always talk about this when people go hiking. Even though you may not get cell phone reception out on your hikes or in the parks you're at, bring your phone with. Besides the fact that the phones these days take amazing pictures, if you do go missing, there is a decent chance that there might be just enough signal that your phone will ping a tower, which gives searchers so much information on where you could possibly be. At this time, it's 5 o'clock. There were reports of considerable amounts of snow and freezing rain that fell over the next few days, so that's not great. Authorities and volunteers, he must have been reported missing pretty soon from this time, because authorities and volunteers started searching much of the trail between White Pass and the Canadian border. Nothing was found, none of his gear or anything. So it says, while official search and rescue teams under the Yakima Sheriff's Department did initial search along the PCT from White Pass, they also did flyovers and road searches. After the initial search, they primarily focused on the area surrounding Blowout Mountain, location of an unconfirmed sighting by 2 bear hunters on October 22nd. So you can kind of see the time frame here. So he last pinged the tower on October 12th at 5 p.m. and there potentially was an unconfirmed sighting on October 22nd. And during that time frame, there also was a search and rescue operation going on. So Blowout Mountain is east of PCT map marker 2354. It's 62 miles north of White Pass. This was where he was dropped off. So fast forward now 3 years. It's 2019, and Yakima County, I hope I'm saying that right for anybody that lives around there. Yakima County search and rescue volunteers again conducted multiple searches of this area, led by Sergeant Randy Briscoe. Fowler said another 15 to 20 volunteers from what she calls her team behind the scenes were coordinating an effort dedicated to combing through areas they knew well, but again, nothing was found. So this is not uncommon in missing persons cases in the wilderness. There'll be a massive initial search, and then sometimes a couple months later to a couple years later, there'll be follow-up searches, either as training exercises or they're going back out there to try to see if there's any details they may have missed. So not uncommon. Of note, when Chris went missing, there was some severe storms in the area. So again, this, a lot of these cases have, they're intertwined with really bad weather going on, which I guess, does make sense. They're saying that if he did get caught out in this storm, he may have been cold and tried to seek refuge in town. There were a lot of people that claimed to have seen Chris mid-October, but a lot of the people that were on the search and rescue called these bogus sightings. So there's not a lot of information that I found on my initial research of this. It is a really interesting case, and at some point I'd like to touch it again. So just to recap, he went hiking. He was real close to the end, and there was some really bad weather when he was set back out. So I'll just go into my theory right now. I think he had an accident out on the trail during the storm, and something happened. He either got, hypothermia, or he went off trail and fell. After I hear your theory, there is a person who lives in that area and gave a quote about what it's like.
Okay.
So I think it was an accident on the trail or exposure again.
So you said the bad storms were like ice and rain storms, so it was cold enough that you're getting like that sleet.
Yeah,
freezing rain.
The report was considerable amounts of snow and freezing rain fell the next few days after his cell phone was pinged.
So the freezing rain is the red flag for me, because snow is a little bit different because you're not getting soaking wet.
Yep.
If he's starting the hike into the night in freezing rain, he's going to get wet immediately. You're going to drop your body temperature. My guess is maybe not an accident, but if he at night, again, it's notoriously hard to hike at night.
Yeah.
Potentially went off trail and started getting hypothermic. I think I'm with you on the exposure. I think the freezing rain, the nighttime hike is just kind of the domino effect, just one bad thing after another, and they all fall down. My guess is off trail somewhere in that pass because of the rain and succumb to hypothermia.
Yeah, and that goes in line with what the authorities were saying. They said he really would have had two options. Like I said earlier, he would have tried to maybe seek refuge in one of the nearby towns. The fact that he didn't do that, some of the authorities believe that he went off trail somewhere between White Pass and Chinook Pass. So,
all right, so maybe he set out assuming, okay, maybe I can just get through this one section and get to the next town, and then I'll dry off and stuff. And at some point between that, it was just the bad decision of. And if you get that, they talk about this on Everest too. Like, you're that close to the finish line, you're gonna start making bad decisions to try and get there faster.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it was one of those, like, he could have just stayed where he was because it's bad to hike at night, but it's like it feels like it's so close. You know what? I'll do this short leg, get over the next town, and get a closer start the next morning type of deal, and it just didn't go his way.
Yeah, I agree. And here's a quote from somebody who lives in the area, and their quote kind of backs up what we're saying. So the quote goes, and it's a little long one here, so bear with me. So I've hiked most of the PCT in Washington, including the stretch between White Pass and Chinook Pass. It's not terribly difficult terrain, but it is in the trees over rolling hills and has some big climbs and cliffs closer to Chinook Pass. He probably only had an hour of daylight to hike, so I'm guessing his plan was to get on the trail, cover a few miles, camp, and make the call on his plan based on conditions. He was likely trying to do a big push day 2 to get up and over the climb to Chinook Pass, which is around 5,000 feet, very exposed at the top, and get past the Crystal Mountain section near 6,000 feet, after which the trail gets progressively easier to hike and stays around 4,000 feet of elevation, and bailing out would be easy as a 5-mile walk on any old logging road to find hunters to hitch a ride with. Most likely, he was hiking after dark with a headlamp on, lost the trail in the trees as snow filled up the trailhead, got disorientated, got hypothermic trying to set up camp, maybe fell or slid down a ravine or got wet in a boggy section, and died of exposure. So you can see from somebody who lives there that if you were trying to do this at night during a bad storm, the chances are not on your side, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of things going against you.
Yep. So sadly, I think our second case, Chris Fowler, in my opinion, it was exposure or an accident on the trail caused by the storm.
Yep, I agree. I agree with you.
Our final case today is a gentleman by the name of Christopher Stevens Sylvia. He went missing on February 16th, 2015. He was a male, age 28. He was 5'9" and 155 pounds. So again, typical young adult, seemed healthy. He had brown hair, hazel-colored eyes. Clothing he was last seen in was a dark-colored fleece jacket, green camouflage print pants, brown and black hiking boots. So he was explained, or people said he was a very experienced outdoorsman, and his mother mentioned it's very uncharacteristic of him to hike alone or to leave his gear behind, which that'll become important in a second. I've never been a big fan of hiking alone. I know people do it all the time, but it's not something
I'm not a big
I like
solo
to
guy.
do. No. I guess if I lived somewhere near a national park, I'd probably do it, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It's nice having a second person in case something happens. So,
Oh, absolutely.
our timeline starts for Christopher on February 12th, 2015. So, again, hiking the PCT, not at optimal times. Like we said, you want to hike it April-May timeframe. That's when you want to start it. So he started his trek near State Route 74 in Anza. He planned to hike southbound on the PCT from Anza to Campo before contacting friends to pick him up. He was expecting this hike to take him about a week. It's now February 16th, 2015, and he calls a friend and asks to be picked up the next day at a Buddhist temple on Chihuahua Valley Road the next day. Sylvia's roommate went to the designated spot at the agreed-upon time, but Sylvia never showed up. At first, his roommate assumed he just decided not to go to the temple after all, but later on, they realized that, okay, something's wrong. He's now missing. So later that week, search teams from Los Angeles, Orange, Riverside, and San Bernardino counties searched in vain for 4 days before, once again, weather forced them to suspend the search and rescue operation. This comes from his brother. So his brother has posted a lot about Christopher's disappearance, and he also adds that there was extensive use of dog teams, choppers, and SAR personnel, but winter storms hampered the search. And this is, again, I hate harping on this, but it always seems in a lot of these strange disappearances, weather always hampers the search and rescue operation. I know David Paulides always mentions this in his books.
Yeah, it's
so
like weather and cave networks.
Yeah.
It's like
So-
for whatever reason.
So, all right. So now it's February 20th, 2015. Another hiker finds Sylvia's gear, including identification, sleeping bag, and backpack laid out alongside the PCT near mile marker 127, not far from Mike's place. Despite a large search effort, Sylvia was never heard from again. So that's where this timeline ends. And don't read the theory I put down, but what do you think happened, Joe?
They found his stuff
Alongside the trail.
and like it was like spread out, or like it was just like he had left it there.
It's they said laid out alongside the trail, so I don't know what that exactly means, but let's just assume.
All right, so you would assume if they're quoting it, you'd think if it was like disheveled, they would have mentioned that.
Yeah.
I'm assuming now.
Yep.
I feel like, all right, he doesn't normally go on solo hikes.
Mm-hmm.
His gear was abandoned. I feel like he chose to disappear.
Interesting you say that.
Yeah, because like he made a bunch of conscious decisions. Did he leave behind like a note or anything that would like make you think he went out there to harm himself?
Not that that I read in my research. So
Okay.
and maybe he did. And
Yeah,
if
I'm just going along if I'm going along the reasons why he'd change up his normal routine, it'd either be because he's trying to get away from something or he wants to commit suicide. And I'm just going along, if he's going to do suicide, you feel like he would leave a note, and they typically don't want to be hidden. They want you to find the body. and there'll be
Yeah.
like a note to explain why they decided to do that. So if he's just gone, it's almost like he ran away. That's or like to escape something.
Yeah.
That's my vote.
My theory, I'm going with suicide on this one, and I will explain why. And
Okay.
I came to that theory before that theory, it was your typical exposure accident, but he was experienced. He was an experienced hiker. So I don't think it was that, but I read a lot of posts from his brother, and his brother had mentioned that Christopher had a long history of dealing with depression.
Okay.
And he even back in 2006 got really drunk and tried to hang himself. Now this was posted by somebody who claims to be Christopher's brother. I have no other evidence that.
Okay, so if we're taking him at his word, he's had a failed attempt on his life. I think that is a big indicator that it potentially could be suicide then.
Yeah, and he's been suffering with depression. His brother mentioned that after the incident in 2006, he hadn't gotten much better since then, and I guess he had just lost a job. And so it sounds like an individual who was having some issues, and maybe...
Like right before the hike, he had just lost a job?
Yeah, it sounded like from what his brother was posting that, I don't know how soon before the hike, but at some point before hiking, he had lost his job at a restaurant that he worked at. So it sounds like this guy...
You got to look at it from the perspective of like someone who's depressed, where that might not seem like a huge deal to somebody, but if you're already on the edge and you feel like the world's out to get you and then that happens, it could be like the straw that broke the camel's back. So I'm kind of leaning more towards your theory now with that information.
Yeah, and I don't like throwing out suicide as a theory lightly. I think in this case, if we take the person that claims to be his brother at face value, long history of depression, has attempted suicide in the past, and the fact that his gear was laid out along the side of the trail, maybe he did leave a suicide note and it blew away, or it's out in the elements. Maybe who knows what happened to it, and they just didn't find it. The other thing people were bringing up in this conversation with his brother was, they didn't find his body. They don't know how he could have done it. I mean, I guess he could have taken, pharmaceuticals with him, or there's a number. We're not going to go into how you would do that. There's a number of ways that could have happened, but I think it's odd. I think it's odd they didn't find him. But I think based on the facts surrounding this individual, I think that's a logical explanation. His brother also did say he was the kind of guy who might just take off. So he said it wouldn't be out of...
I keep going back and forth in my head saying that, like, okay, yeah, it's a high risk for suicide unless he just said, screw it. I'm going to go start over somewhere. I'm just going to like, I'm not happy. Maybe he said he attempted his life while he was drunk. So it could have been just a bad decision when you're drunk and really down on yourself. And he's just like, you know what? I'm going to go out in the woods, leave my gear, and I'm just going to go and start a new life somewhere else and be somebody else. I feel like I like that theory better because it's not such a sad ending.
Yeah. And his brother said it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility 10 years later he would just show up again. So,
well, I hope that happens.
I think I will modify. Yeah, I think so for this gentleman. I think, it's either suicide or he intentionally left his stuff and just took off, and he's living somewhere else, and hopefully he gets the help he needs and reconnects with his family. So that's the three cases I wanted to talk about for the PCT. Anything else to add, Joe?
No, I would say thanks again for tuning into our show. It's great to be back, and we truly appreciate all of you for listening and sharing the show. As I said in the beginning, all of our success is due to our listeners and all the fun things that are happening, especially the big thing we can't talk about yet. I can't wait to release that info. But please keep sharing Locations Unknown with your friends and family. That includes liking us and following us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Go check out our brand new website. We're going to keep updating it and use that hacking instance as a way to rebrand and rebuild. We're going to have different hats coming out soon. We're going to get some pink trucker hats due to high requests from female listeners that they want a pink hat. So it'll be a pink front hat with black backing. We also have our YouTube channel that you can subscribe to for the show. You can see other video content. Mike will always post National Park Service content on there as well. So support the show. Visit us on Facebook store if you want to buy some of the swag and the hats and the bumper stickers. Check out the Patreon account. As Mike said, we're going to be updating that to include swag. So our current Patreon followers, don't worry, we haven't forgotten about you. And go on and sign that up. And I'd say other than that, remember, just when enjoying the beauty of nature, whether backpacking, camping, or just taking a walk, always remember to leave no trace. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.